Want to reclaim your personal data, protecting you from identity thefts, hacks, or worse? Then try Incogni and get a 60% discount on an annual subscription when you use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup. Click below to get started or stick around to the end of the video to learn more.
Alright, I know what you're thinking. Didn't the Alters come out back in like June of this year? And yeah, it did, but I didn't want to let this year go by without shining a spotlight on this one, especially since it didn't get as much recognition as I think it should have at the recent Game Awards. While it was nominated for Best Sim/Strategy Game, I feel like it should have also been nominated for several other categories, like Best Narrative, Best Performance, and Best Direction. So I'm here to give it the flowers it deserves, and with 2025 drawing to a close, and many of us starting to think about how we might better ourselves in 2026, there's honestly no more fitting a review for me to end the year on, for reasons that should become clear by the end of this review. The Alters is the latest game from the Polish developer and publisher 11-Bit Studio, the guys behind the critically acclaimed This War of Mine and Frostpunk. These are games with tight survival and management systems, yes, but one of the biggest reasons they're so beloved and why they each sit at over 90% positive on Steam is because they're games that'll have you look inward, that are trying to change you in some way. Never has that been a clearer goal than in their latest release, The Alters, and it results in a game that has had a profound impact on me in a way that few games do. The Alters is, on the surface, a management game. It's about managing resources, with an emphasis on time as the most crucial resource of all. It's about managing people, keeping them fed, happy, and trusting of your leadership. Given 11-Bit Studio's experience in this genre, it handles all these gameplay systems unsurprisingly well, and with the addition of some nice visuals and environmental puzzle solving, the gameplay alone was enough to keep me hooked for over 20 hours. But what elevates this game from a good one to a great one is in the way it uses its characters and systems to encourage some self-reflection. The Alters themselves are more than just an interesting gameplay hook. They're brilliantly written characters that invite perspective, humility, and honesty. The dialogue system requires you to make meaningful choices, and not in the superficial way that many games do, but in a thoughtful, sometimes even uncomfortable way that will challenge your beliefs and worldview. Put simply, The Alters is a game that doesn't just act as entertainment, but as a learning experience. It's a lesson in how fun survival and resource management systems can be when tuned correctly. It's a lesson in how less fantastical sci-fi can be just as transportive and spectacular as those with laser guns, space fighters, and aliens. But above all, it's a lesson to check in with yourself, to challenge your thoughts and push for personal change. Much like its protagonist, I entered this story expecting a tense tale of survival, but what I got was much more. I came out the other side with some newfound perspective and a better understanding of myself, and I think that's a true testament to the power of video games in the hands of those who have truly honed their craft.
How did I end up here? What kind of bullshit is this?
Now, the setup for the Alters was what immediately grabbed my attention in the trailers. A malfunction causes a research team to crash land on an alien planet, but the wreckage spares a single survivor, one Jan Dolsky. His only means of escape is to drive this mobile station to an evacuation point before the sun comes up and eviscerates the surface of the planet. But Jan is just a builder. He has no way of sustaining himself or operating this thing, so he's advised by the corpos to seek out a special mineral and use it to create a crew of Jan clones. Left with no choice, he gets to work. Throughout the game, you'll birth versions of him with alternate life paths and skill sets. There's a version of himself that, in the hopes of supporting his mother, became a technician. One retook an exam he once failed, leading him to become a renowned scientist. Another got into botany after leaving his career to support his wife, something Jan didn't do, leading to their divorce. We'll talk more about Jan and his alters later, because there's a lot of interesting narrative implications there, but for now, you probably want to know what this game actually is and how it plays. The best way I can describe it is this. Remember Fallout Shelter? That vault construction management sim thing? Basically, if you took that and then gave it an additional third-person exploration component and a strong narrative focus with choice-consequence systems, you'd be most of the way there. The obvious Fallout Shelter comparison is in the base management stuff. You still control Jan, but here it's in a side-scrolling view. This is where you'll be chatting with the alters, using resources to construct additional rooms for research, crafting tools, tools, refining materials and whatnot. You can also build more leisure-centric rooms to keep morale up, things like dorms and gyms, or a games room where you can hang out with your alters and play beer pong or watch movies you've collected. By the way, these movies are like full 5-minute live action or animated skits, and they're actually really funny, so don't skip out on them. I literally watched every single one. But then to get the materials needed to build those things, you'll need to establish mining outposts in the surrounding region. This is where the exploration comes in. Once you leave the station, you're kicked into third person, and you then begin scouting the surrounding region for resource hotspots and collectibles. There's no platforming nor combat, at least in the traditional sense. It's all about managing your tools, your suit battery, and crucially, your time to get to the places you want to go and return in one piece. It sounds a little dry when I describe it that way, but the level design makes every expedition surprisingly engaging. Each new area is this kind of interconnected puzzle of obstacles and hazards that you'll need to overcome or shortcut with smart usage of your resources. For instance, to power the mining outpost, you actually need to daisy chain these power lines from the station to the outpost, but the environment often makes that challenging by blocking sight lines, so you need to be crafty about how to position them. There might be ledges for you to climb, but they consume your suit's battery, so you'll need to craft spare battery charges if you expect multiple climbs. Similarly, battery charges are often needed to deal with these strange stalker-esque anomalies that you come across. Some linger in place and you can kind of just walk around them, but others are drawn to you and explode in a radioactive burst on contact. The most dangerous, though, is one that merely accelerates the flow of time. Time really is the most valuable resource here in the altars. It's used very cleverly as a tangible, trackable resource that makes everything you do require careful consideration. Everything you do consumes it. Exploration, mining, research, crafting, and staying up late causes you to wake up later, which obviously means you have less time to do things the following day. 1 minute of real-world time equates to 1 hour of in-game time. And with only 9 hours in the day before the nighttime radiation sets in, that's a short 9 minutes per day to get things done. Make no mistake, your days are numbered. With each passing day, the deadly sun creeps closer and closer, shortening the days and increasing anomaly activity, only resetting once you move to the next zone. That's something I haven't really touched on. How the game's structure plays out is that each time you move the station closer to the evacuation point, something will block your path, and you'll need to allocate resources to dealing with that problem. Fail to do so in time, and it's game over. The game creates a save file for each day, so it's easy to go back and try again, but I was impressed by how precisely that resource economy is tuned, such that it was basically always a close call, no matter how organized I was. Speaking of organization, thankfully you can get more done in less time by delegating tasks to your alters, and this is where the game really puts your leadership skills to the test. Once those mining outposts are hooked up, you can assign alters to them, as well as assign them to tasks at the base like cooking and crafting. Your alter's mood impacts their productivity. Piss them off and they'll work less. Keep them happy and they'll work at full capacity. And there's a number of factors that go into managing their mood. They'll often have some sort of request to build or craft something for them, so you might need to allocate resources toward that. Making them work overtime can be necessary in dire situations, but too much of it will really mess them up. Something the game industry has finally seemed to learn. Most importantly, it's how you speak to them, but that itself is a surprisingly nuanced affair, so we'll come back to that. Between managing the tasks and demands of Jan's alters, exploring the map for resources and collectibles, and building up the base to better service both of those things, there's some fun plate spinning going on here. It's a very refined gameplay loop. And even when you think you've got things under control and you've got your team operating like a well-oiled machine, the game then throws a spanner in the works. Maybe it's a magnetic storm that breaks down your facilities, so you need all hands on deck to repair them. Or an alter gets sick because you had assigned him to a radioactive mining outpost for too long. Or one injures himself on the job and needs to spend some time in the infirmary. I think some people associate management games with like passive gameplay, but I assure you there is nothing passive about the alters. There is always something to be monitoring, to be actively solving. It's this tense, unrelenting race against time and tug of war of resources that makes the alters a remarkably gripping experience from start to finish. Certainly helps that the visuals, music, and sound design in the Alters is fantastic too. So let me just talk about that real quick. When it comes to video game graphics, we're at a point now where many games look great, even smaller titles. But when going for a photoreal style, it can be kind of hard to stand out, particularly sci-fi, which often leans heavily into the spectacle of shiny, far future technology, so much so that they all sort of blend together. What I appreciate about Alters is that it goes for a sort of understated look. This isn't a vibrant planet with crazy flora and fauna. There's no high-tech spacesuits with jetpacks, no aliens in the traditional sense, no guns to shoot them with. As tempting as it might have been to do those things, and I think it still would have worked out, it's kind of refreshing to see a sci-fi game that trusts in the beauty of alien worlds as we understand them, minus the anomalies. To just exist on a foreign planet with unusual rock formations is spectacle enough, and no less arresting to behold when rendered with such detail and atmosphere. Much of that atmosphere is created by the soundscape, which is similarly subdued. The Alters doesn't push for grand orchestral scores for the most part, opting instead for ambient drones that allow space for the sounds of this alien world to echo through. It's kind of lo-fi, at times even metronomic, in the way that it would put me in a sort of meditative trance, losing myself to the rhythm of day-to-day duties for many real-world hours on end. Given much of your time in the Alters is spent in menus or in a side-scrolling space station, I was surprised by just how immersive the Alters can be as a result of all these things. One of the ways in which I think it stands apart from other management games. But there's also one other key factor at play. I mean, what I've described here is basically a well-constructed management game with some cool gameplay additions and high production value. That's cool, but for me to strongly recommend something, it needs that extra special sauce, something that really puts it a rung above other games like it. And for the Alters, that special sauce is, well, the story of Jan and his Alters.
Olski here. Anyone copy?
I think I am going to meet you. Fear? No. We moved to college. We could have moved anywhere.
There is no good way out of this mess.
To begin this block, let's talk about Jan. He's an excellent main character. He's handy, he's determined, clearly intelligent. He did qualify for space travel after all, but he's hardly a natural leader, or at least doesn't believe himself to be. He harbors deep insecurities stemmed from past decisions made back on Earth. He can't understand why he's the one who survived the crash. He's envious of his Alters, who have each succeeded in ways he could never have imagined. It's that uncertainty, that self-doubt that makes Jan so deeply relatable. At some point in our lives, we've all questioned our purpose, dwelled on our failures, or compared ourselves to others and felt discouraged. But these feelings are what make us complex, make us human. That's where Jan's Alters come in. They exist to offer that perspective. Each one embodies a path Jan could have taken, and while they highlight his potential, they also expose new flaws. The miner, for instance, is a hardened worker, willing to push himself to the brink, but at great cost to his well-being. The botanist is deeply empathetic and emotional, but often that clouds his judgment. The scientist, almost his opposite, substitutes sentimentality for pragmatism, making him brilliant, but difficult to get along with. These Alters communicate that no matter which path you take in life, you'll ultimately end up with new hurdles and new holes in your personality. But crucially, the Alters aren't written as rigid stereotypes. Over the course of the story, it becomes clear that they are capable of change. Likewise, as I helped them grapple with their imperfections, I watched as the original Jan became a little more forgiving of himself and learns from the strengths of his Alters, shaping him into a more complete version of himself and opening new dialogue options as a result. On that topic, as I mentioned, there's a dialogue system here that influences the mood of Jan's Alters, but what stood out to me is that it's not a matter of picking the nice thing or the mean thing. The Alters takes a more delicate approach to conversations, where something you say might stoke a character's anxiety if they're particularly sensitive to that, or speaking without confidence might incite rebellion as the Alters lose faith in your ability to lead. There's rarely an obvious choice when it comes to your responses. The only way you'll get better at knowing what to say is to deeply get to know these characters, and that really was the highlight of the game for me. I mean, you go through a lot together. The fights, the laughs, the heart-to-hearts, the musical numbers.
If I could take another turn, my life would never be the same.
By the end of it all, I felt like I deeply understood these guys, not just as gameplay tools or narrative devices, but as individuals. They felt human. Much of that is owed to how well written they are, but I also must give credit to Yarn's voice actor, Alex Jordan. I mean, this guy showcases some seriously impressive range. He's had to portray something like a dozen versions of Yarn here, yet somehow managed to give each of them such well-defined voices between their tone, their accents, and intonation. His fantastic performance results in not just one, but multiple versions of Yarn that are each as nuanced and as endearing as the others.
So, you decided to go down that path.
Great! Why don't you just hand us over for experiments already? Don't be so goddamn dramatic about it. This will heal our brains, ain't that all that matters?
Let's be rational. Since we already have the tabula rasa, I say we use it.
As a result, I found myself deeply invested in these characters. I wanted to help them grow. And that's when the game turns the lens back on you, asking, don't you want that for yourself? This is where the Alters becomes something more than just a narrative-driven management game. It becomes a lesson on introspection, on who you are and who you want to be. You'll feel this most keenly in the multiple ethical dilemmas that come up, the most pressing being that of the Alters themselves. You know, Yarn hasn't just plucked variants of himself out of some alternate reality, he's basically just cloned himself and used a fancy computer to tweak their memories. These are now conscious beings with thoughts and emotions and lived experiences that feel real to them. As such, there are moments where you'll have to decide what that future looks like for them, even if it's at the expense of those back on Earth. There are many such trolley problem situations like this, many of which are even a little confronting as they closely mirror real-world debates. And yes, these decisions do meaningfully shape how your journey plays out, but more than that, they will teach you to look to others for their perspective, to examine your own beliefs and values, and to be honest with yourself. And it's kind of rare that games do that. Often they deal in absolutes, in black and white, a good path and an evil path. But it's not so simple here in the Alters, because life isn't that way. It demands real thought and real honesty from you. Like, I'll admit, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. Even in games, I tend to be honest and accommodating, because most games tend to reward that. But the Alters was a stark reminder that sometimes I can't have my cake and eat it too. There were times in this game where I was trying to fence sit, trying to please everyone, and it ended up with basically everyone pissed off at me for a time. But in that experience, the Alters taught me some things. It taught me to be more decisive. It taught me that conflict can be more constructive than being complacent. It taught me to respond in ways that are true to myself rather than constantly chasing the correct answer. What's interesting though is because the Alters has you thinking less about the right choice and more about your choice, I think everyone that plays this game will have a slightly different takeaway. The Alters holds up a mirror to your traits. It'll show you how different people might respond to them and invites you to self-reflect without being too heavy-handed about it. I apologize for getting a bit existential and philosophical at the end of this review, but my point is, these are rather mature, profound ideas that I've seen very few games properly explore. But the Alters supports these ideas beautifully with its characters and decision-making systems. Because of that, I think it's highly likely it'll move you, challenge you, and change you, just as it has for me. As you can see, don't really have any words of critique for this one. I've heard some mixed reports on performance, but I personally didn't encounter a single stutter, bug, or crash in my entire playthrough. I'd encourage you to look at some other reviews that have tested it on other systems if you're a little unsure about that. Otherwise, I think 11-Bit Studios had a well-defined vision for the Alters and executed on it brilliantly. This might seem like an odd comparison, but bear with me. I think in a similar way that Expedition 33 elevated the JRPG formula for me with its more action-y turn-based combat, its top-tier presentation and characterization, the Alters has done the same for me with regard to management sims, or whatever you want to call this genre. It's obviously not on the same level, but nonetheless an impressive feat of design, artistry, and writing that's totally sold me on a genre I wasn't too crazy about. It takes what is typically a lot of menu-based turn-based interactions or bird's-eye view city building, and balances that out with more immersive third-person exploration and active environmental puzzle solving. But most importantly, it's got real, actual characters that you can get to know and relate to. Survival games, management sims, these are genres that have an inherently Moorish gameplay loop, but The Alters is one of the few that combines that with a profound message about leading a team, about the value of time, about the measure of one's self-worth. Put simply, The Alters is not just a good survival management game, but one with the potential to meaningfully change you. I mean, I've certainly learned a thing or two about myself over the course of this game. So yeah, even if you aren't a fan of these kinds of games, I'd encourage you pick this one up. I think you'll be surprised by what you get out of it. At $35 US, it's also very reasonably priced, in a time where video game prices are only going up. My playthrough ran me almost 25 hours, but there's certainly room for 1 or 2 more playthroughs to experience all the different outcomes. From what I've seen, the endings aren't quite as distinct as I hoped, but there's certainly still value in replaying the game and experiencing the variations within that journey. It's impossible to meet all of Yarn's alters in a single run, after all, let alone see through all their quest lines. And if those alters I missed are anything like the ones I did meet, I can definitely see another run or 2 being worthwhile. Or don't. I mean, that's part of the game's message after all, to be content with your decisions and not dwell on the what-ifs. To get a game that is this well crafted, this immersive, and this full of heart for that price, and available on Game Pass, well, it's hard not to be content with that. If you've been sleeping on 11-bit studio like I have, consider this your wake-up call, because I think there are a few studios that utilize the medium in this way, to create works that are truly thought-provoking and affecting. And for that reason, I strongly recommend The Alters.
Here's a scary figure. Did you know that the rate of identity theft increased by 211% between 2023 and 2024, mainly due to just 5 mega breaches that leaked terabytes of personal data? If it feels like there's nothing you can do about that, well, you're wrong, because this video sponsor Incogni specializes in helping you reclaim your online data in order to protect you from identity thefts, hacks, or worse. Sure, we know that big corporations like Apple or Google have our data because we hand it over to them, but what you probably don't know is that hundreds of other companies that you've never even heard of also have your data because it's been on-sold by various data brokers. These companies can then sell your data to whomever they like, and you have absolutely no say in it. Now, the loophole here is that you can technically contact these companies and ask them to delete your data, but not only do you not know who has your data, but there are so many of these data brokers that it would be impossible for you to contact them all. That's where Incogni comes in. You sign up, you enter your details, you grant it the required permissions, and after that, Incogni does all the work for you, sending out hundreds of automated requests to reclaim your personal data. Take me for example. Incogni has sent out over 177 requests on my behalf, which has resulted in my data being removed from 171 data brokers. 171! I had absolutely no idea that 171 data brokers even had my data, and now thankfully they don't, thanks to Incogni. If I was to have submitted all those requests myself, doing all the paperwork and back and forth, it would have taken me around 128 hours, making Incogni incredibly well priced given how much value it delivers. In addition to this, Incogni also offers a custom removal option where you can tell it to remove your personal data from specific entities that may not be included in Incogni's automated removal process. Some exclusions apply here, but this gives you even more control over your personal data. It's super easy, super effective, and best of all, super affordable. You can use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup to get 60% off an annual subscription. Take your personal data back and get a 60% discount while doing it by visiting incogni.com/skillup and using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks Incogni for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.